Today we're talking about how to fold in rings around the center without folding whole twists every time. So sometimes you want to leave a twist kind of partially set up, but not all the way set up and squashed, so that it makes the folding easier. And these two are duplicates of the same piece from before and after I figured out this style by teaching in tessellations by tiles, my big course all about the underlying structures of origami tessellations. And I can tell you that folding this first one was a heck of a lot harder than folding the second one. Not just because I had another 2 or 3 years of origami tessellation folding experience, but because I was using a different technique. So let's take a little look at the theory of things and see, where is this coming from? So there's a lot of ways to arrange shapes in repeating ways. These are called tilings. And then a tessellation design, an origami tessellation design, is a way of filling each of those shapes with a matching twist. So a hexagon twist in a hexagon shape, a triangle twist in a triangle shape, and a rhombus twist in a rhombus shape. And that basically gets you your tessellation. And these shapes that are being filled, they can tell you about how to fold also. So this particular arrangement of shapes goes hexagon to a triangle, then rhombus back to triangle, closing the loop with the hexagon. So I call it hex tri rhomb tri, or HTRT for short. And one thing you'll notice is that if you look at the lines formed by the edges of the shapes, the lines go all the way through. This means that there are these hexagon boundaries that we can draw, where we're adding one layer of twists at a time as we go around. But that's not always going to be the case. So this is the case of perfect tiling breaks. This is the ideal case. You'll be able to fold the whole twist and have a nice pleated border. This is not always the case. And in fact, it's not the case even with the same shapes in a different arrangement. So this is the hex rhomb tri rhomb tiling. So it goes hexagon, then rhombus immediately. And in this tiling, you can't go more than two shape edges before you can't continue straight anymore. There's another twist, another shape in the way. So what do you do on this one? Well, that's how much you can get with true tiling breaks. And then you can continue going out, just acknowledging that these lines that you're stopping at run through certain twists. So in this first line out, it's running through the hexagon. In this next one, it's running through this rhombus on each side. The next one is running through a hexagon and a rhombus. And as you go out, you're going to see it run through more and more and more shapes on each particular edge. So what does it mean for this tiling break to run through an edge or through a shape? It means that we're going to have some of the pleats going into that shape, but we're not going to finish the rest of the pleats. We're not going to finish the rest of the directions. We're just going to either, in the case of, say, this rhombus, we're going to set it up as a three-way intersection of mountains, having that third pleat go out across the pseudo tiling break, and leave it as a three-way intersection or a triangle wrap, or whichever side of the paper you're looking at it on, while you fold the things next to it, and then come back and finish that rhombus from the triangle wrap on that next pass around the edge. So this particular tiling, the hex rhomb tri rhomb, is one that comes up over and over, especially when you're looking at older tessellations. If they use rhombus twists, it's usually this tiling. Now my designs, I tend to prefer the hex tri, rhomb tri, because there's a lot more flexibility, a lot more options, and that comes down to where the symmetry points are. In this tiling, the symmetry points are in every single shape, and we can actually look at that. These are diagrams that I made for my Tessellations by Tiles and Tessellation Academy students, so they can reference these whenever they want while they're folding. And in this tiling, you do have those symmetry points in every shape, in every tile. You don't necessarily have to. That's where the extended symmetry comes in. But for standard usage, we're going to be seeing the full symmetry. And that's as far as this pattern takes us, this really abstraction of a group of patterns. Let's take a look at the one I'm actually going to be folding in today, which is taking things a little bit further, a little bit more extreme. So here I actually have two distinct rhombus positions. And these are shown in red and white because they share a pleat. They need to be opposite rotational senses. And so this one goes hexagon, rhombus, rhombus, back to rhombus, back to hexagon. So I call it hex double rhomb tri. And then there's this triangle making things happen further out. So we do get a little bit more flexibility with this tiling of where what fills each twist position. And you can see there's that one position of rhombus that doesn't have any symmetry points in it at all. Let me zoom in on that for you. So we've got our hexagon, our rhombus that's in a position of symmetry, our triangle, and then the rhombus that's not in a position of symmetry. Those are the four things we're trying to keep track of in this tiling. And what we can see, and actually this is a tiling that I haven't taught in any of my courses yet. I actually made this diagram for myself so I could see where these pseudo tiling breaks are and have an easier time folding. So this is going to be kind of on the side while I'm folding today. And I'm going to be doing a pattern that's very similar to whirlpools that we saw earlier. It's called enveloped. And I'm going to be folding it with more repeats than I've ever done before. And this could get interesting. It could get really long too. We'll find out. I'm going to be using a 48 fold grid. So 48 divisions from side to opposite side. And you can choose to use a smaller grid as you have available. That'll also make it a bit easier as you go about doing this. So since I already have in my head the choices of the 4 twists that I'm going to use, I'm going to just go ahead and start folding them without pulling up a crease pattern, because what I'm thinking about as I'm folding is actually what's going on at the tiling level instead of what's going on in the crease pattern. So I'm going to start with a closed hexagon twist in the middle. And yeah, with it being a bigger grid, it's going to be a little bit more fussy to get that in place. One of the remedies for that is to not try and run the pleats all the way in, like let the valley be a little bit flexible. And then we'll run it further in a moment. And so there I ran my valleys all the way in, and I've got my little hexagon tower that I will bop it, grab it, twist it to get it down into place. And smoothing out my pleats. I'm then going to place a closed rhombus twist at tube pleat spacing just outside of this hexagon. And this is going to look exactly like the beginning of Sawtooth, a pattern that's in the hex rhomb tri-rhomb tiling instead of the hex double rhomb tri. So, and incidentally, one that was in Advent of Tess, I want to say 2022. And so I'm setting up my tube pleat spacing where I have my valley one space outside of the folded mountain and my mountain one space further, creating this tube structure. And the grid line from the hexagon will be the through line of my rhombus. This is mandated by the fact that I was folding a tube pleat. I could potentially attach the rhombus to the hexagon differently, but I would need a different angle for this pleat. So I'm going to work my way around, and I'm going to go to the bottom of the tube, do the same twist on that pleat. And as I run this vertical up, notice that this is one spacing over than the tube, the mountain of the tube. I'm going to form a triangle wrap. So I'm opening up the pleat from the first rhombus and letting it wrap around in there. And this is creating an accordion under the pointy end of the first rhombus. And I'm going to go ahead and do that all the way around. And for those of you watching the recording, no, this is not sped up. This is just my normal folding speed. So I'm working my way around, setting up the tube, setting up the triangle wrap. And if my triangle wrap isn't happy, like that one was almost unhappy, I can flip over to the back side and make sure that all the folds are actually on grid lines in order to continue. And then for this one, I'm going to open the pleat from my first rhombus, lay down the tube for the new rhombus, and in some order, put in the triangle wrap above and restore that pleat from the first rhombus before squashing my new rhombus. And then for this sixth rhombus, I'm going to open the pleat from the original rhombus, pop it down so I can come across it on the valley at an appropriate distance, and we're going to make the triangle wrap and have that accordion pleat with the through line, and we get our triangle wrap up above as well. And again, these steps are all in an Advent of Tess video. It would be like 2022 day 10 or so. And so if I was following that sawtooth pattern, I would then flip over and turn all those triangle wraps into closed triangle twists. But that's not what I'm going to do this time. This time, I'm recognizing I'm at that first green boundary. I have my central hexagon, I have these 6 rhombuses, and I have the triangle wraps that are prepping for the next rhombus. Okay, so what I'm going to do next, actually what I'm going to do is come in to a closer view that incidentally will also let me see if there are any comments or questions. And I'm going to then fold the open rhombus twists, which are going to be the symmetric rhombus twists. Symmetric in the scheme, the broader scheme of the pattern, not the particular twist itself. And I'm going to continue folding out until I reach that next ring in the tiling. So we've gotten to this first one. We're going to fold to the next one. And this is going to mean that I'm going to complete that rhombus. I'm going to have a partially set up duplicate of the inner rhombus. I'm going to have a triangle, and I'm going to have a complete version of the inner rhombus on all 6 sides. So that's what I'm going to continue looking at as I fold, but I want to see if y'all have any questions as well, so I'm going to keep it in this view so I can monitor the chat. So what this is going to mean is I'm taking these triangle wraps and I'm going to put in an open rhombus twist here. So this is going to be a little bit dense up in here, but I can move my pleats out and identify that open rhombus, and I'm going to squash that whole thing. And then I'm going to try and see, okay, what should I do next? I have a pleat overlap here, so that's where I'm going to go next. And that's going to be in the direction of the triangle. And in this case, that triangle, it's going to be an open triangle, and it's going to be on this pleat, not the pleat from the rhombus I just made. So I'm going to take that pleat from the rhombus I just made and pop it down one space outside of the corner. And as I set up this open triangle, I'm going to also put in a triangle wrap kind of around the corner of that open rhombus. And one of the things that's occurring to me right now is what you're able to see here demonstrated before your eyes, I do not even have the crease pattern open. I have not looked at the crease pattern in months, but I did look at the photos of this pattern, and I saw, okay, I have a closed hexagon, I have a closed rhombus at tube pleat spacing coming off of that hexagon, and then I have the open rhombus and open triangle in positions of symmetry. And then I'm just looking at the tiling in order to continue folding. So that's really what's going on under the hood. So now I'm coming to my next triangle wrap that's going to turn into an open rhombus twist. And as I set this up, I notice there's a pleat overlap right there. And it doesn't need to be a pleat overlap. It can be a compound wrap instead. Of course, you could leave it as a pleat overlap, but the compound wrap is smoother and easier to squash on. And I know from previous experience that when I have a compound wrap, so let's take a step back. When I have a triangle wrap, I can freely fold a triangle twist. When I have a compound wrap, I can freely fold a rhombus twist. So I'm going to go in, flipping over to this side and pop that compound wrap up to fold the rhombus twist. Now I'm leaving the triangle wrap in place because I saw on my tiling that I'm going to have one rhombus on this side that's left as a wrap after this round is completed. So now I'm back to where I was with that first open triangle. I'm going to go through and put in my next open triangle twist. So now I've solved basically one edge of this round around the center, and I can then be confident moving forward that I am folding exactly what I want to fold, and I'm not going to have any extra. I'm waiting to fold each thing until it is time. I'm not just jumping in and saying, oh, I see where this goes, therefore I'm going to fold it immediately. That is not what I'm doing here. I'm going to take a sip of water. So once I've solved each edge, I'm just going to go ahead and do exactly the same thing for all of the edges. So notice here, this is another thing that I am not doing. I am not saying I'm going to do this twist next and then do that twist on all 6 edges. That is not what I am doing. I'm saying there's this sequence of steps that involves multiple twists that gets me to a good stopping point, and then I will perform that sequence in a ring around the center. And actually that was the triangle wrap that I'm not squashing right now. And once I've become familiar with the sequence, I can go ahead and do things like this, like putting in the compound wrap before I've even really found where all of the pleats for the rhombus twist go, because I know from seeing it twice already that this is where that compound wrap needs to go. And so even though this pattern has a pretty high density, it has these flagstone looking bits, I'm able to fold in a very straightforward way that is really just helping me along, and the paper is being quite helpful in this. We'll see if that stays true for the next ring around the center. And so I'm getting these pieces in place. I already know, because it's exactly the same as the first edge that I was working on this ring around the center, exactly what's going on. And we'll see probably a slight deviation from that on the last few twists around the center, but not by much. So I've got this compound wrap that's turning into a closed rhombus on the other side. And flipping back, I'm getting my new triangle twist. And if anyone does have questions, feel free to drop those in the chat. Especially before I look back at the tiling again. Okay, so right here, if I run this pleat straight through, I'm going to chop a new fold into the corner of my rhombus, but I don't have to do that. I can put in a compound wrap that shifts the mountain further out. And in this particular case, since there was a pleat sitting under that, it's going to take that pleat along for a ride as if the pleat wasn't even there. It's just going to stay folded. And we're going to get our new rhombus. I'm going to go ahead and resolve that compound wrap. One of the convenient things about a compound wrap is that all of the mountains for the closed rhombus twist are already in the right places. So that's highly convenient. Then flipping back over to the flagstone side, I'm going to set up my open triangle in here. And here I'm kind of restoring pleats to where they were before I did that compound wrap in here. And then I'm going to do a new compound wrap on top of that. Of course, I could do it as a pleat overlap, but I would rather do a compound wrap because it's smoother. And then squash that twist on top. And flipping over. So these compound wraps that are turning into closed rhombi, I could have chosen, like Chris mentioned in the chat, I could have chosen to leave all of these compound wraps for now. and squash all of them at once. But this is kind of a personal preference thing. I like to not leave stuff for later because I might be interrupted to go and do something else. And then am I going to remember that I can still get these rhombuses done in this portion of the pattern? Or rather, like, while I'm on this ring around the center. So there's trade-offs on that. I definitely could have left them, but I wanted to get them all the way done. And so returning to our tiling, we just finished this ring around the center. Those rhombuses that I could have left for later are these in the corners. And it's time to look at the next ring around the center, which will be the first time we come back into contact with hexagons. And excuse me, what we're seeing here is I'm only going to be able to get 3 of the pleats. So each edge of a tile is a pleat coming in to the shape. I'm going to get 3 pleats of the hexagon. I'm going to finish those rhombuses. I'm going to have another symmetric rhombus, and I'm going to have a partial rhombus on the hexagon side. So I'm going to be able to finish this rhombus. I'm going to have a half hexagon tube. So since I'm using a closed hexagon, this is a convenience that I have, that if I have 3 pleats going into it, I can run the rest out as a tube pleat out in this direction. And then I'm going to get a full rhombus. I'm starting a partial rhombus. So of the 3 pleats going into the hexagon, one of them is a rhombus that's going to be completed. One of them is already, so going to be completed, already completed, and then there's going to be one that will not be completed. So for any particular hexagon that would be going to be completed, is completed, will not be completed. And then we have this rhombus in between. So returning to a folding view, I'm going to start kind of arbitrarily by seeing what would happen if I just go ahead and complete this rhombus. That's not great. So instead of doing that, I'm going to find my set of parallel pleats and see, okay, what needs to be done on this first pleat? Or I could equivalently say this one, but that's going to be the hexagon leading directly into that rhombus, which I decided already not to do. So what's going on this top pleat? And that's going to be going into a open rhombus on the other side. So I'm going to flip the paper over. And this open rhombus is going to come into, okay, so words before movement. It's going to have its edge along this edge of the open triangle, just like these two do. And so I'm going to have my valley fold coming from the corner of that triangle. And I'm going to, really what I'm thinking is, okay, I need to pop that down one spacing out from the corner of the triangle. And I'm just going to make things lay flat above there, which turns out to be do a triangle wrap where there's already a triangle wrap And then I can complete my open rhombus. So I've got stuff laying flat there. I can complete my open rhombus, which we said earlier would be all the way completed. And now when I flip over, I've got 4 pleats running into this area. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And I just need to shift this one over a spacing to get that closed rhombus that will be around my open hexagon. And then, my closed hexagon. And then opening up for that hexagon, I'm going to say that, okay, this is how the pleats are right now. I'm going to add 1 more pleat to this hexagon. And notice where I gestured, I'm adding it on this side, because if I added it on that side, it would interfere with a pleat that we already just added. So that's something to be aware of when we're working with these pseudo tiling breaks, is that we only really want to interfere with pleats that we haven't interacted with yet. And there's, of course, exceptions to that. But in general, this is what we want to do. So then now I have a pleat overlap and I want to resolve it, but I know that of the 3 rhombi around this hexagon, 1 of them got resolved this time, 1 of them was already there, and 1 of them is going to be set up partially but not completed. And so I have my tube pleat spacing. I'm going to open this up, pop down where that fold was coming in, and make a triangle wrap around there with a triangle, well, 3-way intersection. It'll look like a triangle wrap from the other side up top. So now I'm going to continue from that triangle wrap, flipping over, and that's going to set me up for my next open rhombus. And so now I'm repeating steps. I can move a little bit faster. So I'm popping that down, and notice this is my valley. I'm getting a little bit of a hexagon vibe in the middle here, like a closed hexagon vibe. And so that can be kind of a landmark for you in your folding. And I can squash my new open rhombus into place. And then, just like I did last time, shift this pleat over and down to squash the closed rhombus, and then open up the overlap of those rhombi to set up the beginning of the hexagon, and add a 3rd pleat to my hexagon, leaving the rest of the hexagon running out as a tube. So on each side, I'm going to have a 3-way intersection for the next rhombus and a hexagon running out as a tube. And so now that we've seen that twice, I'm going to move a little bit faster. In the interests of finishing in less than 2 hours. set up my open rhombus, resolving the pleats above however works best, and then flipping, and now I'm shifting the pleat over and squashing, just like if I had a three-way intersection that I wanted to turn into an open triangle twist. Setting up my new hexagon, I'm going to add the third pleat. And really this step could be done as you add the third pleat of the hexagon. The particular order is not super important. And I'm going to repeat those same steps again, making sure not to undo twists that are already existing as I put in my new twists. And, you know, also trying to stay on screen for you. So now that the folding sequence for this ring around the center is established, I do have a bit more brain space if anyone wants to ask more questions. Or I could keep folding quickly. And so this is the process. There's no magical step to make the, like, considering the pattern that I'm working on, using the pseudo tiling breaks is the magic trick to make it easier to fold. I would be having a lot more pleat overlaps, a lot more trouble folding this if I was just blindly guessing which twist to fold next. But here, I'm easily arriving at places where I don't have any pleat overlaps, and then I'm choosing to add more, and it's very much a controlled process instead of a random process or a reactive process. So this is kind of the goal for tessellation folding. You want it to be predictably relaxing. You want it to be pretty certain that you're going to be able to fold whatever it is that you've chosen to fold. And having an understanding of the tilings involved and the folding processes used on particular tilings can really help you get there. This is what I'm going to be teaching in Tessellation Academy. Like I mentioned earlier, the diagrams that I've been showing are ones that will be shared in Tessellation Academy. And here on this last bit around the edge, I went to find the pleat overlap for this third pleat on the hexagon, and it just wasn't there. It was more natural to do a three-way intersection on this side instead, because I'd already folded that open rhombus. So that is my stopping point for this round around the outside. And for the next one, I'm going to be finishing the hexagons. I'm going to scooch this over so we can see one edge really well. And what this is saying is I'm going to finish my hexagon. I'm going to have another rhombus. So when I finish my hexagon, it's going to have 1, 2, 3, 4 fully folded rhombuses around it and one partially set up. I'm going to get a triangle, the symmetric triangle in this ring around the center, and I'm going to have a setup for the open rhombus on the back. But that's really the summary. 4 rhombuses fully folded, 1 partially set up, 1 rhombus on the other side, partially set up, and I will get a triangle as well. So bringing that into the paper, what that means is I'm going to take a set of parallel pleats. This one I'm going to finish the rhombus. So that's finishing this rhombus. And the order around in the paper doesn't necessarily have to match the order around in the tiling. The mirror image of the tiling is also the same tiling. So the next thing that I need to work on is actually that triangle. So I'm going to flip over and set up my open triangle twist. I'm going to have a triangle wrap up above. And I should say, when you flip your paper over, you are also probably mirroring the tiling, which is more a problem of like how you perceive things and less a problem of math. So we just did this triangle. My next overlap is that 3-way intersection, which is becoming a rhombus, and we're going to get the full rhombus. And so as I look at this, I don't really like how dense these overlaps are. So I'm going to open that up and make it a pleat of the hexagon right away. And then I get to finish the hexagon. So I'm opening this up, running those 2 pleats out. And this is a step that could have been done before I squashed that previous rhombus. And making sure that I actually twist that hexagon all the way around. And now I've completed this edge. I want to fold the next rhombus to start the next edge, but that's not quite the whole story, because right now I have 3 rhombuses around this hexagon, and I'm going to have 4. So this one is going to be my next full rhombus, but before I squash that, I'm going to set up the 5th rhombus as a 3-way intersection on top with a triangle wrap down below. That's going to be the partially set up rhombus for the other side. So that actually did like add an extra layer onto a pleat that we just put in. But in this case, it was justified by the tiling. And so now that I've figured out that that's what needs to be added each time, I'm going to switch back to focusing just on the paper. And I'm going to get my open triangle in here. And flip over, and I'm going to need my closed rhombus in here, and I can go ahead and set up all the pleats of the hexagon because I'm not going to have any overlaps from my rhombus that I'm setting up. And if I do that, I probably want to get the hexagon down and in place first because I'm not adding any new folds when I squash that closed hexagon like I am with the rhombus. And so I want the area to be more stable before I add new folds. And I don't know if y'all are hearing the thunder, but looks like we're in for a storm. And so then when I'm setting up that next rhombus from the wrap, I also want to make sure to wrap on top and below for that next pleat from the hexagon. And that's going to set me off on the same loop again. So yeah, this is very much like crease patterns demystified, and we haven't even looked at a crease pattern. What we've been looking at is, hey, I know that my crease pattern is in this category. It's using this arrangement of shapes. And I can remember what shapes were in each position and how far apart certain ones were. So I don't actually need the crease pattern in order to fold that. I just need the tiling. And this is really how you go about reverse engineering. It's how you go about folding from crease patterns in general. It's how I fold everything. And crease patterns for me are more of a planning aid where you say, how many repeats will fit on this number of grid spacings? Where you say, what is the alignment between the grid and the pattern repeats? And those are great questions to ask of a crease pattern. But how should I fold this? That is not really a question that can be answered directly from the crease pattern. It's not something you can point to in the crease pattern. What you can say is this shape of twist is connected to that shape of twist. Over here, I see a repeat. And this is all of the distinct shapes that I see in this pattern. Those are questions that can be answered with a crease pattern. But how precisely should I fold this? No. And that's actually something that I've been thinking about lately. Should there be more instructions on how precisely should I fold this, like written out? Because it comes down to like time spent versus how helpful is it? Is it more helpful to just make a video? Or would it be helpful to have written patterns? What would it even mean to have a written pattern? Especially, what does that mean given that I have 500 different patterns? And so if I do make written patterns that are more than a crease pattern, it's not going to be for all 500. It would have to be like some smaller selection of patterns. So, yeah, definitely lots to consider. And it looks like I'm coming around towards the end of this ring around the center. This time, as I put in the hexagon new pleats, I do get a pleat overlap because I did already resolve that that rhombus on the far side. So I'm going to do my little wrap on top, wrap on the bottom right here. And that is all the way around the center. We've got at least another, maybe 2 rounds around the center to go. That's a good question. The different colors in my tiling patterns represent different handednesses of twists. So right and left-handed. You could decide to make that opposite sides of the paper. In this case, it's not, because the red hexagon and the white rhombus are both on this side, while the red rhombus and the red triangle are on the other side. And there are many ways to color a tiling. Another way to color it would be all the hexagons are one color, all of the one type of rhombus are another color, all of the second type of rhombus are a third color, all the triangles are a fourth color. So that would be coloring by distinct position. You could color, so one of the things I've been playing with recently is having different colorings for the same tiling, showing different symmetry options. And that'll be a great segue at the very end. For right now, I'm going to get myself started with the next ring around the center, and then talk a bit more about these different tiling coloring options. So this is our next ring around the center. We're not going to hit any hexagons. We are going to finish the rhombus that we set up, have a closed rhombus on the hexagon side, do another another one of each, and then set up an open rhombus without finishing it. So we're going to finish all of the closed rhombi around those last hexagons, and we're going to get a triangle. Okay, and we're going to have 1.5 rhombuses for the next hexagon. Okay, so in folding, the first thing I'm going to do is take that rhombus that was partially set up and finish it. Conveniently, it is on one side of the set of parallel pleats, which is why I'm doing that one, and also it's the side of the set of parallel pleats where if I have pleats headed this way, they're not going to run into stuff. It's kind of a delicate balance, and definitely a trial and error kind of thing to identify. But I'm very confident that this particular one is the one to start with. even though I haven't folded this far out in this pattern before. It's just how this pattern has been working so far today. And so I folded that, I did a compound wrap up above and flipping over. That's going to be my next closed triangle over here. And as I fold that, I'm going to get a compound wrap down below. And this is going to lead to having a double depth pleat. So this is going to come out looking like a closed trapezoid twist until we flip over and fold the open rhombus twist that is waiting on the other side. And so I need to figure out, okay, that is how the pleats need to be for like for the twist to sit well on that side. So it's not just accommodating what needs to happen to lay down flat. This is where the pleats actually go. And then I can find my new rhombus, my open rhombus here. And I'm going to need to do the compound wrap that's right under the corner that leads to a double depth pleat. But still, nice spacing, everything's laying down flat, we're good to go. So that was this rhombus. Next, we're going to have another closed rhombus. And it's coming out of the compound wrap. And then we're going to have a setup for a rhombus on the other side and finishing a rhombus on this side. So I'm going to open this up enough to finish this rhombus that was set up as a triangle wrap, and I'm going to wrap underneath. So that was finishing, so the triangle wrap is setting up this rhombus, and we finished the rhombus that was previously set up. And now I'm going to need a triangle twist on the opposite side. Maybe. Ah, I see. Before I get there, I'm going to need to set it up by resolving this open rhombus, and that is going to set up the pleat overlap for these twists, the setup and the triangle in the corner. So flipping over, I'm going to have my compound wrap up here. And what do you know? That's a setup for a triangle and a triangle wrap that will resolve those pleats in the corner. Okay, so back to folding view now that I've figured out this round around the center. And flipping over, I'm going to repeat my steps. So I've got the closed rhombus on this side, and I'm seeing in the chat, how do I determine which twists are on which side of the paper? Well, that's something that you do at the tessellation design stage. It's not, well, you need to be able to find which twists are which in the crease pattern if you're going to fold the pattern, and be able to identify when you're working on which position as you're folding. But as far as designing, it's kind of an arbitrary choice. Which twist is on which side. There's a lot of different options, and it really does come down to what kind of patterns you prefer, and what kind of thing you want to, what kind of patterns you want to play with. Now, I will say, if you're already looking at a crease pattern, then the answer is twists are on the front if their central shapes are outlined in mountains, and they're on the back if their central shapes are outlined in valleys. But beyond that, as for like in a particular design, whether something is chosen to be on the front or on the back, there's going to be some symmetry constraints in some tilings, but you really have free choice for a lot of cases on what you want to go where. But it's not something that you know from the tiling. So here's some things that you can know from the tiling, or at least that you can, that you can guess about a tiling, which is how many distinct positions are there going to be in the tessellation? What kind of shapes fill those positions? Like in this case, I can tell you from the tiling that there are going to be one hexagon, two distinct rhombus, and one triangle positions. But I can't tell you what side of the paper they're going to be on, or or exactly which twist, which rhombus, which hexagon is going to fill those positions. I can tell you from the tiling where the symmetry points are. Like I can tell you that the hexagon is going to be a position of 6-fold rotational symmetry. And I can tell you that one of the rhombus positions is going to be a position of 2-fold rotational symmetry, in this case the open rhombuses, and the other position, the closed rhombuses in this case, are not going to be a position of rotational symmetry, which is to say that one pleat goes to a triangle, another pleat goes to an open rhombus, another pleat goes to a different corner of an open rhombus. So this one is going to go to a skinny corner, this one's going to go to a fat corner, another pleat's going to a hexagon. None of those pleats are going to the same place. And so I don't have any global symmetry in the pattern in the center of that rhombus twist. But for example, with this open rhombus that I'm folding, I can tell you that, okay, the pleats from the skinny corner are going to closed rhombuses in a particular way. They're going to be diagonals of the rhombus, if I see that correctly, yeah. And then the fat corners are going to be going to through lines of the closed rhombuses. And so there's pleats going to the same thing on either side, and it becomes a position of twofold rotational symmetry. Likewise, the open triangles. They are, like, all three of the pleats from the open triangles are going to through lines of the closed rhombi. And actually that means that I was wrong a little bit in what I said earlier. The pleats from the open rhombi are all going to diagonals of the closed rhombi. Because the through-line pleats are going to the hexagons and the triangles. And then there just aren't enough through-line pleats to go anywhere else. But yeah, you can tell I can talk about this all day. And gladly. So definitely keep the questions coming. And it looks like we are going to get one more round around the center. So we're getting a nice long folding session today. But we're getting close to all the way around. Yeah, I think this set of parallel pleats and one more. So that's actually another thing that you can see here, is it doesn't actually take me that terribly long to fold a tessellation. I mean, usually I'm doing more repeats than this. Usually I'm doing like 56 or 64 grid divisions for the really nice pieces. But yeah, I've been at it and teaching things for a little over an hour now. And I've got quite a lot of pattern. Not that I expect anyone else to match that speed. As I said earlier, I have 500 of my own designs, and I've been doing this for a while. Plus, it's something that I'm kind of naturally pretty decent at. I've been folding origami for 2/3 of my life. 2 decades now. So definitely not something that you're going to pick up. Like, you know, don't be frustrated when you're not on the instructor's level after 1 year of practice. That goes for any skill. But yeah, we're getting very nice repeats on the other side there. And that's the side that I would actually consider the dominant side of the pattern, the one it's named for. This is just the side that it started on. But yeah, ooh, yeah, we'll be able to see the next full repeats. That's fun. Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I have not looked at this crease pattern lately. I didn't actually know how much we were going to get done. And we're coming on around, almost finished with this set of twists around the center, this ring around the center. And just one more will do it. That twist, and also one more ring around the center. So that's nice. Flipping, I just have a little intuition that we're going to be starting with this. I'm going to bring back the tiling view. And there we go. So we just did this ring around the center. And for our next one, we're going to end up with 3 complete rhombi around half a hexagon. We're going to get another triangle. We're going to set up and do a full rhombus for the next hexagon that we're not touching yet. We're going to complete this open rhombus and do that open rhombus as well. So what I'm looking at here on my paper is I've got a set of parallel pleats. This is kind of the short end of that. So I'm going to start here. And that is one, let's see, we're in this ring. That's one that's already been set up. So that's something to look for when you have one that's already set up at the corner of your ring around the center. That's probably a good place to start. Again, it kind of depends which way you're going around, whether you want that to be up here or down here. But yeah, there's options. And so for now, I'm going to start with that rhombus. And that is going to feed into a half hexagon that is going to have another completed rhombus attached to it. And so I'm attaching that and making the pleats around it lay flat. In this particular case, since I'm so close to the edge, I'm going to go ahead and fold the rest of the pleats for the hexagon. And then I can squish. So I folded the rest of the pleats for this hexagon, and then I can squish this rhombus. And that's one of the things too, as you get up into the edge of the paper, you might decide, hey, I don't need to fully follow these tiling break rules. And then opening things up in here, I'm going to need a full rhombus up here and also a triangle in there. And I can go ahead and wrap that. And I think it makes most sense to just go ahead and set them both up. They're not feeding directly into each other, so it's still pretty stable to squash. But if I tried to do either one of them without the other, it would be a royal pain getting the paper to lay flat. And then flipping over, let's see what was between getting that rhombus finished and that triangle. There's a partially set up rhombus, but here at the edge of the paper, it's not actually going to cause any issues if I just go ahead and squash that. And then on the far side was a fully set up rhombus on that compound wrap, which I can go ahead and squash. And then I'm back to the beginning with the caveat of this corner bit is going to come out after I set up my next rhombus twist. Although I will say for this particular case, because we've seen this combination before earlier, if I was folding with more grid, I would go ahead and set up that open rhombus on the back first, because that's the one that will let things lay flat, or that's the way that'll let things lay flat. And then I can push this over and into place. So from here, I'm repeating. And again, since I'm so close to the edge, I may as well fold the whole hexagon. This is going to come with rhombus twists attached on either side. Only one of which is in this particular, like inside of the tiling break, but again, we don't care because we're at the edge of the paper. And it's so easy to just resolve, on screen, so easy to just resolve that overlap that I'm just gonna fold the whole hexagon and roll with it. So coming back to this view, I'm gonna fold until the end and go ahead and keep going. So the question in the chat is, once I have a tiling pattern, does that guarantee, or does that determine that the twist that I have chosen will work out? And the short answer is not quite. So it's a combination of tiling and symmetry. And if you look at my series on how to draw patterns in various symmetries, you'll start to see that there's a few constraints on what twists are possible. Like, for example, in this particular pattern, if I held the hexagon and the two choices of rhombus constant, the only triangle I can use is this open triangle. So likewise, like really, if I have the closed rhombus and either any two of the three symmetric positions, that's going to determine the third symmetric position. So there's a little bit of restriction, but yeah, I definitely start from the tiling first, and then I'm making choices for each tile, like, okay, I want my hexagon to be closed, or I want my rhombus to be open. And actually at that point in time, I'm deciding I want my hexagon to be closed and on the front. I want my rhombus to be closed and on the front. I want my my triangle to be open and on the back. Because conceptually, sure, you can divorce twist size from what side it's on, but that kind of starts to break down when you look deeply into it. On some level, the definition of a twist is not so much is it closed or is it open, but is it closed and on the back, or is it open and on the front? And so only once you reach that level of specificity do you actually have a twist that you can use in a pattern. So yeah, basically I'm like for this pattern, for example, I didn't choose the hexagon first. I actually chose the kind of the more decorative element of the pattern first, where I said, okay, I want a pattern where I have the open rhombus and open triangle cycling like this. Just like in whirlpools, I had the closed rhombus and closed triangle cycling like that. And I knew I wanted it to be in this tiling because that was the tiling that worked for the closed version. And so I was playing with it and seeing like, okay, I can have that and have closed rhombi on the opposite side between them. And then it was a matter of saying, okay, given all of this, what hexagon goes in the middle? And so there's some freedom of choice, like with the hex tri rom tri tiling that I showed at the very beginning. There's complete freedom of choice. You can choose any hexagon, any triangle, any rhombus on any side, and they will all work. With tilings where all three distinct symmetry positions are in the center of twists, that is not necessarily the case. So because I have a symmetry position in a triangle, another symmetry position in a rhombus, and a third symmetry position in a hexagon, I don't have quite as much flexibility on this tiling for choosing arbitrarily like what twists are going to match up together. But yeah, good question. And that actually pulls in another kind of diagram that I've made for my Tessellations by Tiles and Tessellation Academy students, which is a decision tree, where you can say, okay, this is a decision that I'm making about how to assign twists to this tiling. And is that decision, like what are the possible options after I've made that choice? What are the possible options once I've made the choice and then made the next choice? What if I made the choice a different way? So that's what the decision trees are designed to show. And once I get this the rest of the way folded, I'll bring up some examples. And once you have your tiling, at least for me, I really use the same style of folding for all patterns in that tiling. So like that diagram with the tiling, the pseudo tiling breaks for the hex double ROM tri tiling. I use that for whirlpools. I'm using that now for enveloped. I could use it for any of the patterns that use that tiling, because they all work the same. And we're getting down to the, well, almost the last set of parallel pleats. So yeah, next time someone asks you, how long does it take to fold an origami tessellation? Send them over to this video. Might be shorter than they think. Or who knows, it might be longer. But yeah, tessellations, I think, are really in line time-wise with knitting or crochet. And I mean, I've done slower hobbies like cross-stitch. You're going to spend tens of hours on a cross-stitch piece if it's a sizable piece, if not hundreds of hours. Like cross-stitch is dedication. Origami tessellation, that's an afternoon. And granted, I didn't show the hour of gridding that happened before this video, but there's so much you can do while you grid once you're comfortable with it. Okay, so we're coming around. I'm on the last set of parallel pleats. Yeah, it is a 48 fold grid. So one of the great things about tessellations is that you don't have to learn to fold each pattern individually. You can learn the tiling, and then the tiling can tell you how to fold all of the patterns in that tiling, which is wonderful because there can be hundreds of patterns in a particular tiling. There's really not a limit on that other than your imagination. Some tilings have more obvious options than others. But some of what I've been discovering over the last couple years is you can make more options in really any tiling. The simpler tilings are easiest to see it on because you don't need more than 64 grid divisions to get to repeats. But pretty much any tiling has unexplored options. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and say every tiling has unexplored options. There is no tiling that has been completely explored. Have the simplest options been explored? Yes. Have all the options been explored? No. So there's always more to fold, which is fantastic. And as for how did I figure out which way to squash that, the pointy corner points in towards the triangle in this pattern. So that's what I used. Then that's gonna go that way. And we get to the end of the piece. Ta-da! All right. So let's see what we have. On this side, we've got our central kind of sawtooth-esque pattern, and we're able to see that repeated. We're getting into the next round of repeats right at the edge. And then on this side, we have this ring of triangles and rhombuses around our central kind of swirly bit. And that's a motif that I've used, I mean, like you saw in whirlpools, I've used that in lens stars, although in lens stars the twists are actually connected, so you can't do it with the open ones because they'll spread out relative to each other. And you get that whole bit repeated out again. So that's awesome. I will say this is a lot easier to fold than whirlpools, because whirlpools, the only difference between these patterns, or the difference that makes a difference, is that here the rhombus twists are closer in the poinsettia spacing instead of the sawtooth spacing. And that makes all the difference. It mandates that I must use closed triangle and rhombus twists instead of open ones. So the difference is one spacing between the hexagon and the rhombus, and that changed all the rest of it. So there's lots of variables when it comes to these designs. And I know I said I would bring up a couple of other ways of looking at these. let me do this. Okay. So I've got a whole bunch of these tilings diagrammed for my students. And you can see, like, I had an old style. This is the new style. I'm always evolving my diagrams. You can also, in both Tessellation Academy and Tessellations by Tiles, see some of these decision trees. And the one that I just taught in Tessellation Academy is this square tiling decision tree. And this is strictly for the alternating patterns. Now, if it will load for us, there we go. So when we choose to have, like, okay, closed square, open square, hybrid square, then we can, and we're taking the square tiling to mean we have twist A and twist B, whatever A and B are, but they're going to be alternating like this. So we have twist A that can be closed, open, or hybrid. And I've just defaulted to those all being mountain folds, red for mountain, blue for valley, so that I could say, okay, twist B can either be on the same side or the opposite side. Again, with the choices of closed, open, or hybrid. And then with the hybrid twists, if it's hybrid on hybrid, you actually get a choice of orientation too. And here I've cut down some of the choices, so I don't give you the option of saying open and then closed, because closed and then open is already an option, and those are equivalent. And so coming in here, you can see I've populated a lot of this chart, but there's still lots of openings. And for example, this ABBA clusters isn't the only option that's feeding from a choice of closed on one side, open on the other side. And then this one was mirrored in the Tessellation Academy design workshop last month, or this month, February, last week. We did the same cluster, but spaced apart instead of mirrored. So there's so much that you can get into just with a few choices, and getting into, like, okay, we've got our design questions, like, what's twist A? What's twist B? Is it on the same or opposite side? What's the spacing between things? Should the spacing be uniform? Should I have mirror lines between groups of things? These are all valid options. And then on the colorings of tilings side of things, I've actually been writing a paper recently that goes through exactly this, saying, okay, we've been using these tilings as if there's only one way to color them, but you can color things different ways. This is still a tessellatable pattern that can repeat infinitely. Just the symmetry points are moved elsewhere relative to the densest possible symmetry. You can color that another way. You can take a look and say, okay, there's 2 hexagons and 2 triangles in this way of coloring it. And I can tell you that the 2 hexagons that you choose and the 2 triangles that you choose for the pattern, those need to have particular relationships. It goes deep. It goes really deep. But you can go and color things as many different ways as you like. There's no limit to this, which is why I say we have not discovered all of the tessellation of the patterns for any tiling. There is no tiling where we've figured out all the patterns, because you can color them in multiple ways, and that has not been explored. And like, basically, given the properties of tilings being tessellations themselves, I can tell you there are infinitely many ways to color any tiling. Period. It's just whether they're nice to fold, because they repeat in a reasonable amount of space. So that's what's going on with these tilings, and why it's so exciting to me to be able to document them. And then just realizing, like, tessellations by tiles has 20 different tilings in it. I have about 50 documented tilings just on triangle grids. These are, like, this is what I'm trying to get into and explore in Tessellation Academy on a more ongoing basis. So yes, there's tilings that teach you so much about how to fold, tilings that teach you about how to design by filling in these distinct positions. There's different ways to fill in the positions on tilings, and yet they're still all folded the same way. It's just what you put in each place as you fill it can change. And then there's ways to modify tilings. Like, it's kind of crazy, this idea that you could have like an alternating triangles tiling, and then decide to subdivide that triangle in one way, or you could go and decide to subdivide that triangle in another way. It all works. It all keeps coming back and making beautiful patterns. So Chris, I wasn't looking at the chat when you wrote your question. I'm gonna assume you're talking about like the blue and gold colors. So those are marking distinct positions in the tiling. So saying, okay, every dark blue hexagon is the same twist. Every lighter blue hexagon is the same twist. Those don't have to be the same as each other. And in certain cases, they can't be the same as each other in order to really apply. Similarly, the lighter triangle is going to be a different triangle twist than the darker one. And yeah, there's so much that you can build into that. So yeah, that's what's going on. There's tilings under everything, and so much to explore. There's a lot of tilings that I've identified that I haven't even had time to design, much less fold tessellations in. And this is really the theory that's underlying everything that I'm doing. And it's not something that you need a computer science degree or a math degree to work with. It's moving shapes around and then figuring out, okay, does this have the potential for symmetries? Can this pattern repeat forever? And then filling in each distinct position with a twist and making sure that your symmetries that you see in the tiling are matching the symmetries that you see in the crease pattern. And you can make sure of that by choosing different twists. And the way that I do it is I've memorize the symmetries, really it's hexagonal, triangular, square. These are the symmetries that I'm most interested in. And each of them have a special triangle that marks the points of highest symmetry. And so when you're struggling to find, okay, what twist could fill this symmetric position, you can go back and look at those other two positions of symmetry and draw that special triangle and say, okay, that has to be the center of this twist position that I'm trying to fill. And that really cuts down on the trial and error. Like if I was trying to design this tessellation from the inside out, saying, okay, I want a closed hexagon, then I want this rhombus to be here, then I want an open rhombus there, now, or even saying, I want an open triangle there, now what rhombus fills that position? Because the question, what rhombus fills that position, is kind of the hardest one to answer in a symmetric context, just because of the flat foldable states of rhombus twists. But yeah, that's kind of off on a tangent for sure. And I do have videos on how to draw crease patterns in different symmetries. So I also have a symmetries playlist on like what are the symmetries, and then how to draw the crease patterns in these symmetries. So I'll make sure to link that in the chat, or sorry, in the description once I'm done recording. But yeah, definitely if you're interested in these topics, check out Tessellation Academy, check out Tessellations by Tiles. There's a lot to dig into. Like this level of depth in each of 20 different tilings, and actually 2 lessons on 4 of those tilings in Tessellations by Tiles, and a different tiling every single month in Tessellation Academy. So yeah, definitely a lot to dig into, but it really unlocks freedom in folding. And you can see where I'm at with folding is I'm sitting down, I have my grid, or I've planned my grid in advance for a particular crease pattern, and then I'm keying onto, okay, what is my tiling? What twist is filling each distinct position? And how far apart are those first 2 twists? And usually that's all I need to know in order to go and fold the tessellation. And often I'll have a tiling diagram, especially if it's one I haven't worked in much, like this hex double rhomb try, to help me along the way and see, okay, what is 1 layer added here? What actually is 1 layer? Because this is not an easy question when you're in the middle of adding twists to a piece of paper and you're trying to get it to all work out. So happy folding, everyone. I'll make sure to add all the links in the description in a moment. And I'll see you next week. And actually next week, I'm starting a series on smocking, or making these patterns in fabric. So hopefully I'll see you there. Happy folding. Until next time.